Terry Tao. I always loved mathematics as a kid. It's one of my earliest memories when I was like 2 years old. And my grandmother was cleaning the windows at home. And I was just seeing that she put she put the detergent on the windows in the form of numbers. So I always like numbers and patterns and logic and so forth. And the things that very black and white, where there's one right answer and everything else is wrong. I didn't like so subjective shades of gray type of questions. I would work on math books for fun. You know, my parents wanted to shut me up. You just give me the workbook and I just do subjects and so forth. So I always like mathematical competitions because doing that was very different from doing research mathematics. The type of problems that you're given in a problem point, these are so very canned problems that you can do in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And they don't prepare you completely for a research problem where you have to spend 6 months, you have to read the literature, talk to people, try something that doesn't work, try it again. And it's a very different experience to do the research, but I like it better, a lot better than all the puzzles I used to do as a kid. I don't do these things very much anymore. My mother was a high school math teacher when she was younger, so she did help me a little bit when I was a kid, you know, just talking numbers with me. And I had a lot of very good mentors when I was like 10 or 11. There was a retired math professor in Adelaide, which I'd go visit on the weekends. We'd have tea and cookies, and he would just discuss some recreational math problems. And would say, oh, it was just a lot of fun. He told me stories about how he used maths during World War II to do ballistics and stuff like that. It was kind of fun, you know, to see math actually being used for something. He had a PhD in maths from Princeton from 20, and he was appointed professor of mathematics at UCLA at 24. I enjoyed it when I was a kid. I mostly enjoyed doing math and geeky things, and being an accelerated and going to uni that early. You know, I was around people who are older than me but had similar backgrounds. We're at the same level mathematically, 5 years older, and we're both studying the same assignments. We're talking about various math concepts. So I feel at home. You know, I did miss out on maybe sort of the regular high school experience. I didn't go to many high school social events and so forth, but I did a lot of that actually once I was in grad school in Princeton. So then I hung around people my own age, and you know, and then I partied and so forth. And I had sort of a slightly reorganized childhood, but it worked out well for me. And I have to say, Terence Tao is getting there, and he only got 1 out of 7. Let's actually cut Terence Tao some slack, the gold medalist. The guy is coming to close to like solving the prime conjecture. Is actually pretty awesome because he holds the record as the youngest person to ever have won the gold medal. It was this question 6. Oh yeah, this famous question. What's your recollection of it now? And you didn't get it right. No, I did not get it right. How do you feel about that? Well, you know, you win some, you lose one. It was so long ago now, I don't remember much about it. I do remember once the competition was over, I found out that some Romanian woman had answered the question. And I remember searching out for her because it was really bugging me that I didn't know how to solve the question. But there's a special trick to solve it, which at the time was not a standard trick that was taught. And you had to use a method of descent. You had to, I forget exactly the correct question. You had to show that something could be a perfect square. It was always a perfect square. And if it wasn't, you could find a smaller counterexample of it, and then a smaller one and a smaller one. I think nowadays it's become a part of the standard training. And so they all know the trick now. But yeah. Were you competitive? Were you the sort of boy that would get upset about, oh, it's just a fascination, I just want to know the answer? Were you angry? I think I was more obsessive than competitive, you know. Certainly I was a bit angry at myself for not getting it, but I wanted more to know the answer than to win, I think. There's this famous image of you with Murdoch, this great photo. People want to know what you're discussing in that picture, what's going on there. So I think it was giving me a math problem, which I did. I think I even know what it was, because he did send me a postcard afterwards with what may be the same problem. I have it somewhere. I think it was some math conference in Adelaide. I was like 10 or something. I don't know why I was there. Maybe somebody was there, some math professor was there at University of Adelaide that called me to come there. I understand he was always very good at speaking to mathematically gifted kids. And I don't remember much about our conversation, except I remember that I really felt like I was being treated like an equal. Like it wasn't condescending or anything like that. It was a very pleasant conversation. now editions has passed, it does have some sentimental value for me. It is, yeah. I mean, I certainly wish I had paid more attention to it. Actually, I've heard of him. As a child, but it's just somebody that yeah. To me, he was just someone who liked talking math. It was great. He did write me a letter of recommendation for Princeton later on, so he did help my career directly. Did you ever have people you looked up to? And you thought they were top guns? Not really. I mean, I would learn about Gauss and Newton and stuff, but these are largely just names. I think I didn't really have a sense of, I learned all these theorems and tricks and stuff, but I didn't really ever have a good sense of what was the most important and what was, I didn't know the why of mathematics until later. And then I remember when I was learning calculus, I thought that the most important mathematician in the world must be Taylor, because Taylor's name appears everywhere. In calculus, Taylor expansion, Taylor's rule, and so forth. And he was a good mathematician. And there were many other people who did good stuff that was just not taught as much in undergraduate level. When you're doing mathematics, do you use any kind of visualization in your head? What does it look like in your head when you're doing math? That's a bit hard to explain. Yeah, so there's always a combination of thinking inside your head and speaking out loud, working on the board. You need to try to isolate sort of the simplest metaphor of something for your problem. How can I explain it? So, for instance, I do a lot of estimates. I always want to do X less than Y. And sometimes it helps to think of it sort of an economics problem. You have a budget of Y, and can you afford X? And then that way, you start thinking economically, so the way you prove an inequality is like X and Y. Normally, maybe X by Z, and then Z by W, then W by Y, and so forth. But this is like trading in one item for another item. And you get a sense of sort of what inequalities are sort of good deals for you. You're getting your bang for your buck, and which ones are really wasting your money. Sometimes you're using sort of your financial intuition can be helpful. Algebra and topology. Those have always been my weakest areas. I've only been able to get a handle on these areas generally by translating them into other types of mathematics, geometry or analysis. I have a better handle on. I certainly don't claim any mastery of all of mathematics. I think nobody could do that, not since Hilbert. The work I'm proudest of is almost all joint work. I think nowadays most of his work is joint. It is really fun to talk over a math problem at a really high level with a co-author who is really on your wavelength and understands what you're thinking. Saying things out loud. It's more forces you to think like at a more organized level than in your head, where it can get a bit jumbled and vague. And it's just more fun. You go back and forth, and if you're stuck, maybe somebody has a suggestion of he or she is stuck, you at least guaranteed one of the person is interested in what you're doing. When you're out by yourself, there's always some nagging feel in the back of your mind that no one will care about this, that you want to have at least one person to talk about it with. What do you think of Field, or what's your impression of those mathematicians that go the opposite way? Andrew Wiles is an opposite example, the mathematician who works in solitary. How does that impress you? Well, what is very impressive, in fact. I think you need both. You need people who focus very, very hard on one very narrow problem, working for years to become a very deep expert. But then you need the people who can connect, think from different fields. He makes his living by understanding what field X and taking some ideas from that and applying it to field Y. But I couldn't do that if there weren't people who are very deep in working in field X and so forth. So I think it's great that there's a huge diversity in mathematics. If we all thought the same way, we all had the similar philosophy, it would be a much poorer environment. You can't really call your shots in mathematics. Some problems, sometimes, the tools are not there. It doesn't matter how smart or quick you are. The analogy I have is it's like climbing. If you want to climb a cliff that's 10 meters high, you could probably do it with the right tools and equipment. But if it's a sheer cliff face, mile high, and there's no handholds whatsoever, forget it. It doesn't matter how strong you are or whatever. You have to wait until there's some sort of breakthrough, like some opening occurs like halfway through up the cliff, and now you have some easier sub-goal. There's some speculation as to some possible ways to attack a conjecture, but nothing is really promising currently. you're not climbing that cliff, but if a few footholds appear,